Well, kia ora whanau, ko Jim Tukawingawa. If you managed to miss the Sustainable Construction Series, essentially the episode that was labeled, what was it labeled? It was labeled Best Bang for Buck, Fastest Return on Investment. I'm sorry, but what we did is we recorded the video and then we played back the video and it was extremely long. And so here's a very condensed version. It was a really good chat. Basically, there were heaps of experts in the room. There was a lot of Q&A. So rather than bore you with an hour and a half, what I'm going to do is just power through these slides and basically cover over what you missed. So I'm going to break this down and I'm going to try to label it and time stamp things in the video so that you can just step to it. So the first little bit is basically going to be covering over essentially what the Sustainable Construction Series is. Then it's going to cover over a little bit about my background. Then we're going to cover over essentially some design aspects. And then jump into the best return on investment I reckon you can do on any house by far. Like there's no better ROI on this very small change because like one of the things that we said was basically like you can halve your energy bill for less than $500. So you know, you can't put half a solar rig up on your house for less than $500. So why not basically look at this and do that? And yeah, then I'll just wrap it up. So welcome. This QR code will take you directly to the 231 High Street events page, which will list all of the Sustainable Construction Series here in Otatahi. And so yeah, scan this, follow us on meetup.com. That way you will be informed every time a new series pops up. It's not just going to be at 231 High Street. There are multiple locations. We've already done factory tours. And basically we're going to move it around Christchurch. So let's jump into the first slide. Was health and safety. You don't need to worry about that. Little bit about 231 High Street. Essentially, it's an event space. It's made very low barrier to entry. They've hosted over 130 events. It's a community space, and they've just started co-working. Now, there were lots of experts in the room. There were certified passive house people. There were architects, designers, builders, you name it. But let's jump into the future episodes. So what we are planning to do is run these monthly. Now, sometimes we'll actually have more than one event per month. So it might be a factory tour and a talk. So do keep an eye out. We plan to do talks on construction waste, on the true cost of housing, on passive solar versus passive house, on leaky buildings version 2.0, vapor controls, encapsulated moisture, thermal drift, which are all really cool buzzwords, but really important. So, you know, things like thermal drift, essentially, it's what the R value is when it first goes in, and then over time, it reduces. We're going to be covering over things like different types of construction. So whether it's a SIPS panel, an ICF, a prefabricated system, we're going to be covering as much as we can. And what we don't want to do is we don't want to basically have it so that it's a salesy, preachy session. So we want to have experts from all different aspects and make it so that people can ask questions, ask the tricky questions. It's not going to be a sales pitch from a particular person. If it is going to be based around a particular topic, we're going to have multiple vendors in the room so they can all argue at each other. Okay, also indoor air quality, best bang for buck. This is what this one is, but I guarantee there's going to be more based on return on investment. Is solar worth it? Different types of construction methods. And then we basically jump to where we are today. So what this talk is about, so this is the talk that I did. It's around designing right and gaming the system. Yeah, a little bit about me. So as a kid, I always wanted to be an architect. At high school, they basically said my maths wasn't good enough and I wouldn't be an architect. So I went down a different path. I studied as a developer and then found I never liked working on other people's code. So I went down a whole different rabbit hole altogether. So when I bought my first house, I decided to renovate it myself, being the DIY, including removing load-bearing walls, all that sort of thing. Since then, I've renovated multiple houses, quite a few rentals, mostly my brother's rentals. And when I decided to build my own house, I went down a very, very deep rabbit hole as far as energy efficiency goes, because I wanted to design a house that was healthy, that was affordable to run, and ideally, it would have been passive house. However, my budget didn't allow for it. It could have if I had reduced the size of the house quite significantly. But what I did was basically built to passive house principles. I know that's like with people in the passive house realm, you can't really, like they say, you can't really see that. It's like saying you're sort of pregnant. But I utilized a lot of the of the passive house principles in the design. So I'm very adverse to the whole ecosystem. So basically went down the rabbit hole, decided to design it myself. I'm sure some people are looking at this going, oh my goodness, there's so many ins and outs and this would have been expensive to build. And yes, it was expensive to build. However, I did a lot of the work myself. I spent more man hours on this than anybody else. So I installed the underfloor heating system. I put the walls up. I put the insulation in. I ran the cabling. I was there doing everything. So all the way to paint and plaster. And I learned one hell of a lot. During that process, I realized essentially there was a gap in the market for people to actually visualize and see their house, because not a lot of people could actually visualize their house. So I developed, along with two co-founders, I developed VR software for the building industry about 7 years ago. So we had great fun designing the software. We knew it was a limited run. Eventually, the large CAD manufacturers were going to basically come in with massive budgets and build a much better product. But yeah, we had great fun while we did that. And the whole premise was basically to showcase people. Essentially, you can build a house and you can actually have a look through it before you actually build it. So really trying to eliminate mistakes in a build. So when you walk into a room, you can actually see physically how big the room is, because everything was a one-to-one scale. So we saved a lot of money for people and saved a lot of headaches from mistakes. Moving on from there, let me see if I can go to the next slide. Basically, I jumped into sales for quite a wee bit. And I've sold things from cookie cutter homes, just normal standard box builders from basically one of the largest largest box builders in New Zealand, all the way up to selling certified passive houses. And yeah, now I am a contract business analyst. I walk into businesses and figure out essentially what they've been doing, what they're currently doing, what they want to do, and work on improving that. So I walk into a business and usually shake up their BDM side, the business development management side, have a look at their IT infrastructure, make sure that essentially everything's scalable and they're using best practices. And yeah, basically often turn not so profitable companies into profitable companies, which means that they can grow without the growing pains. Now, let's jump into the talk. So, my house is a great case study for ways to save money. When I was designing my house, I started with the core principles, such as north facing. building on the right side of the road. It took me 9 months to buy a section because when 7 years ago, when I was looking for a section, I could easily get one on the wrong side of the road. Here in Christchurch, there's a really bad easterly wind. And what you want to do is you want to be essentially, you want to have the road over here on this side so that your backyard is baked in afternoon sun and that you can build your house. And see, I've got a little outdoor raked undercover area here. This house blocks the easterly wind. So when I have a barbecue over at my neighbor's house, over on the other side of the road, we will usually finish that barbecue an hour, sometimes an hour and a half before a barbecue would normally finish at my house. Because being outside, let's say this was on the other side of the road, my backyard would be forced to be out this side. Now, that's fine for morning sun if there's no easterly wind. But in the afternoon, which is when the majority of us tend to spend our outdoor living, it's pretty poor because you've got a massive house casting a massive shadow in your backyard. And here in Christchurch, you're exposed to that easterly wind. So it took me 9 months to basically get the right section. I didn't pay any more for it. I just had to basically get it. And then position the house towards the sun. So my house is east-west, north is essentially directly up. And I maximized the northern glazing. So I've got nice large windows to the north and somewhat sort of minimized some of the glazing to the south. There's no way this would pass certified passive house, I can assure you that. But I used some of the passive house principles. Also, reducing western glazing. Western glazing is an absolute killer to houses. Houses overheat if you put too much glass to the west, because in summer, it could take 4, 5, 6 hours for the sun to set. You know, so from 3 o'clock till 9 o'clock, you've just got afternoon sun beaming through these western windows. So if they're too big, what you have to do is have shading, and that's not curtains on the inside of your house. That's shading on the outside of your house. So you need some sort of external shade, because if the heat gets into the house, it's already stuck in that house. So curtains don't really do a hell of a lot. I mean, they help, but what you want to do is have external shading to large western windows. Yeah. So my house, lots of concrete floor, soaks up the sun, holds the heat quite well. And I did all the standard things. So thermally broken double glazing, thermally broken slab, hydronic underfloor heating, whole raft of things. Now, another thing about heat is to we all pay to heat our homes. Now, if you were to double your insulation, you can practically halve your heating bill, because once heat is inside a house and you want to keep it warm in winter, the only thing to really do is just insulate it well. And that's why thermoses work so well. So one thing I would highly recommend, increase your insulation. That means thicker walls. Don't do 90mm stud, you know, go 140 plus a service cavity, go SIPs, go ICF, go hard. Also, good quality windows makes a lot of sense. And now the building code has finally basically said you also have to have an insulated slab. One thing that I think is a bit strange with the H1 building code change was when they brought in the H1 building code change this year, I don't think they really looked at return on investment at all. They basically went, hey, look, this is what people should do. They never increased the wall insulation value, which I find absolutely pathetic. It was R2 was the minimum. Now the new minimum is also R2. Thankfully, they've put a minimum rating on windows to be R.5. There's windows out there which achieve R1.2 1.35, 1.45. So you can definitely get better quality windows. And with those windows, it tends to be triple glazing with low E coatings and a massive thermal break on the frames. But yeah, putting more insulation in a wall doesn't cost very much. So the return on investment is huge. One thing I always look at is the very front door. Like the front door should have been the first thing that they looked at. You know, they've mandated this change to the new H1 building code change so that everything has to be R.5, but they basically didn't really specify that front doors need to be insulated. So people can still just put raw aluminium on their front doors, which if exposed to sunlight in summer will bake the house, especially with all these, like if you've got a black front door, it's just soaking up that heat and it's literally like turning a heater on inside the house, and vice versa in winter. If it's aluminium, it's just a raw heat sink to the outside and that heat just disappears. So I would highly recommend putting a really good quality insulated front door into every house, because one front door is probably 2 to 2.5 square meters of a thermal bridge. It's just a raw hunk of metal. So yeah, definitely upgrade that to maybe a PIR door or something else. Also with the H1 building code change, they introduced new zones. It's kind of strange. I think back in the past, they used to have multiple zones and then they reduced it to 3 or 4, and then they've brought it back to multiple zones again. I'm glad that they've done that. But if you look at it, the roof is R6.6. That's good. It's an upgrade. But the walls are still R2.2. And yeah, windows, at least in Christchurch, should have been 0.5 anyway. We've now mandated slab on ground and floor insulation. The funny thing is, like, what it should be is mandated edge slab insulation, because 80% of the heat is actually lost through the edge. Because that's the bit that's exposed to the elements. When it's -3 degrees outside and it's blowing wind, it's just the edge that's exposed to the elements, and that's just sucking heat away. Doesn't really matter how much insulation you put under it. You could put massive polystyrene pods under your house with added polystyrene under the footings, and it's not going to make much of a difference compared to the edge insulation. So where are we spending our money? So the interesting thing is, with heating, heating and cooling tends to be the majority of everyone's electricity bill, and that also includes heating water. If you build a certified passive house, obviously you get to eliminate a whole heap of that. You get to eliminate basically that whole big red chunk, which is absolutely awesome. And then you've just got to pay for water. And there's ways to actually reduce these amounts. You know, so like even with that water, you could go heat pump hot water, and you would have that electricity bill. Or in fact, you probably get a 3-to-1 coefficient usually on hot water heat pumps. But yeah, this is usually where we're spending our power. On average, it's a couple $100 a month for most houses. Now that's across every month. However, that doesn't actually take into account the amount of people that have fireplaces and the amount of people who have gas hot water. So realistically, the average electricity bill, if you factor in all forms of heat, if you say electricity plus other forms of heating, including heating hot water, it's probably $220, maybe $250 a month. Now in summer, it's going to be a lot less. In summer, it might be $100. And then for some brand new houses, and unfortunately, I've sold some regular building code houses before. I bet they were cold and still expensive to heat, because the building code's still not good enough. So Yeah, it's interesting to see essentially how much people are paying on electricity. Now, how do you get a good ROI on electricity? So part of it is basically, okay, you've got the option to go solar. Now, if you go solar, you're buying a large solar array, and then you've got the option to also buy a battery system as well. If you do go completely solar, you could bring your electricity bill down to zero. Assuming you put a battery system in, or you put a massive array in, because when you sell it back to the grid, you don't always get the best dollars back. In some countries right now, in some areas, they are actually charging people to accept electricity back into the grid. So that there's too much solar being produced and there's not enough demand. So what do they do with it? They basically say, hey, look, we're actually not going to pay you for it. Now, let's imagine that you were a standard user. Now, if you go solar, it might make sense because the solar salesperson's going to say, oh, if you buy our solar array based on this, you will get your money back within X amount of time. That's your return on investment. Now, X amount of time might be 10 years, 15 years. More than likely, it could be 20 years if you want a zero electricity bill. Now, if you're paying $20,000 for 20 years, you know, that's a lot of money. Now, okay, average yearly bill is just over $2,000 a year. So if it is a $20,000 system, okay, there's a 10-year ROI. More often, to get to that zero mark, it's a lot higher. What I would challenge you is, how do you halve your electricity bill? How do you go from a $2,500 electricity bill a year down to $1,000? Because I reckon you can do it $500 or less. And this is partly what this talk is about. Now, batteries are expensive. Batteries are ridiculously expensive. And if you've got a battery, you'll know exactly how much it costs. But the interesting thing is, almost everyone has one of these at home for their home. It's just in a different style. So a hot water cylinder is a battery. It is a thermal battery. It holds and retains heat. So just like a normal battery, you could charge up a battery and then you can use that battery and you can use that power elsewhere. A hot water cylinder is identical. However, rather than it being electricity, it is just pure heat. And you can move that heat elsewhere in your house. And you can use it elsewhere. So there's lots of different hot water cylinders that you could buy. So you could buy just a normal conventional hot water cylinder. You could buy a solar-ready hot water cylinder. You could buy a solar-ready hot water cylinder that, rather than just having one electric element in it, it actually has two electric elements in it. You can buy ones which have a copper coil in it for underfloor heating. You could buy ones which have a copper coil in it for a electric wetback. There are lots of different options of hot water cylinders. Now, to change them, like to add this, add the solar ready option, doesn't cost much. You know, you're probably looking $100 or so. To add an extra element is just a few $100s. To add a copper coil is a little bit more, you know, so that might be an extra $500 or so. But what's best practice when building a house? Now, we know that when we go back to here and here, hot water heating accounts for a lot of the bill. A lot of places, for some unknown reason, are installing gas. Now, gas, we know the price of gas is just going to keep going up and up and up. And the New Zealand government has already said we actually don't want to be dependent on gas, and they actually want to start eliminating gas as a primary form of heating, both for heating the house as well as heating hot water. I think what you will find is, unless these become some sort of renewable gas system, being hydrogen or something else, they might get phased out, just like conventional electric heaters. Conventional electric heaters, as a primary form of heating, now no longer passes the Healthy Home Standard, and you now need to basically put heat pumps in. You need to have an efficient form of heating, so something like a fireplace or a heat pump. Now, what is best practice? Best practice for heating hot water is easily getting it solar ready and then attaching a heat pump to it. Now, there are hot water cylinders that already have a heat pump attached. Sometimes it's just attached to the very top of the heat pump, and you put the entire thing either outside or inside your garage. The advantage of putting it inside your garage is you're scavenging heat from inside your garage. So sometimes the COP, the coefficient, can be a little bit better. The other advantage is in summer, if you leave your garage door open while this is running, you actually cool your house, because it's basically taking the heat out of the air and replacing it with cool. So I've seen some systems over in America where they duct the air conditioning, because it's when this is heating hot water, it's blowing cold. And that blowing cold could be blown into your house in summer, which is quite clever. But I digress. And yeah, this is easily the best option. Now, it does take a wee while to get that money back, because you might pay an extra $1,500 for this feature. Now, if the average electricity bill is $2,500, and 23% of that is hot water, you're probably looking at $500 a year on hot water. If you could replace that down to $150, that's a great deal. So that means within 4 or 5 years, you've already paid it back, and then it's cheaper water forever. But this is where I basically say, is there a better way? Can you hack the system? And what is your moral alignment? So if we put our thinking hat on and we want to really hack the system, what we can do is we can decide when our hot water cylinder is heated. Now, hot water cylinders are a high draw appliance. Your power provider actually wants to control when these are turned on and turned off, because when there's a large demand on the grid, they will flick a ripple switch, and everyone's overnight hot water cylinders will turn off. This is partly why you can have hot water cylinders with 2 elements. So you can make it so that the top element is always running and you never run out of hot water, and then the bottom just turns on at nighttime when it's nice and cheap. But if we flick back to here, we have the option here with a tiny little relay, which is about $40 now. This little relay allows you to control when your hot water cylinder is turned on and off. The advantage of this is, rather than the electricity provider basically turning stuff on when it's convenient for them, you get to decide when it turns on, when it's convenient to you. Because players like Contact Energy and a few other providers are now offering free hours of power. I'm with Contact Energy. I get 3 hours of power every single night between 9 and midnight. Now, 3 hours of power is not enough to heat a full hot water cylinder, because a full hot water cylinder can store about 20 kilowatt hours of heat. Now, if it's 20 kilowatt hours and you've got a 3 kilowatt element, that's going to take about 6 or 7 hours to fully heat. But why not buy the hot water cylinder that has 2 elements in it? And then you could put 2 relays on it. And with your 3 hours of free power, even without a heat pump, eliminate the heat pump, don't even use the heat pump, you can basically heat an entire hot water cylinder for free every single day. So that means basically hot showers for everyone, and you're not paying for it. I myself, this is the system I run. So I have the old relay system. So these wee little relays here, these are the new ones. These new ones are way cooler. But these ones even have a wee little thermostat. Sorry, not a thermostat, a temperature probe. And these temperature probes actually go into the hot water cylinder. So on the side of the hot water cylinder, see, I can see there's this little cable that comes down here. I mean, it looks tacky as all hell. Most hot water cylinders do. That goes into the hot water cylinder. So I can actually see at all times how hot my hot water is. And it would never run out of hot water because the automations instantly allow for it. So over here, I do have a heat pump. I've got a 3.6 kilowatt air to water heat pump outside. And this here is the control for that heat pump. I then have the hot water cylinder element on the top and the hot water cylinder element on the bottom. And my house has underfloor heating. So I also have one of these copper coils. And this copper coil connects to this manifold. And this has, I think, 8 or 9 100-meter loops. So I've got a kilometer of underfloor underfloor hosing. It's PEX pipe, polyethylene crosslink. So PEX pipe, that basically one loop goes to every room. So I can control how much heat goes into each individual room if I really wanted. I can put wee little solenoids on top of each of these. This component here is a expansion valve, and then this gray pipe and this gray pipe is the hot water going, basically this 36, 55 degree thing, out to the hot water cylinder. So what does it look like? On average, I pay for less than half my power. Now, for that, essentially, yes, my heating for my whole house is done via the underfloor heating. But that's not to say that you can't run radiators and that you can't actually tap into your hot water cylinder. Tap into this battery. This is a 21 kilowatt battery. Now, if you go to somewhere to buy a 21 kilowatt battery, it's going to be, I don't know, maybe $10,000, maybe more. Whereas you could just put one in, and a brand new hot water cylinder, you're looking less than $2,000, you know, for one of this caliber. You know, you could get one with just a couple of ports and a couple of, you know, just a couple of connections for $1,500. You might even be able to buy something on Trade Me pretty cheap. But yeah, this is hacking the system. So here, as you can see, during the 3 hours of power, I used 438 kilowatts of electricity, and that was free for an entire month. And then I paid for 251 kilowatt hours at 24.40 plus GST. Now, we also do have a heat pump dryer, which we run almost every night. I've got 2 kids. We, at least every second night, if not every night, the washing machine's on, the dryer's on, the dishwasher's on. Again, we just set the timer and it runs 9 till midnight. Heat pump dryers do take a while. And guess what? The length of a heat pump dryer load is about 3 hours. So even if I had to pay for electricity, I've still got nice, cheap, efficient forms of heat, which is just a normal standard heat pump and heat pump dryer. But yeah, that's really it. This was the bit where I basically asked if anyone had questions, and I would still encourage you. So if you do have questions and you want to have a chat, do feel free to ask. Now I have documented a whole heap of stuff, and in fact, BRANZ are currently monitoring my house. So BRANZ do something called Heap 2. What Heap 2 is a whole heap of monitoring information to monitor essentially the indoor air quality of a house and how much power consumption it's using. I think mine's going to throw them off a little bit because I'm still going to be quite high on the power usage side, but very low on the cost of running because I'm gaming the system. Of course, if I went certified passive house, like I wouldn't have to worry about an electricity bill, especially if I went premium. But I would pay a lot more for solar, for batteries, for quite a lot of stuff. Yeah. Okay, so this is an option with Contact Energy. If you did want, it's up to you. There's a QR code. Essentially, it's a refer a friend. Share a $200 discount. I get $100 credit. You get $100 credit for switching. But what it is it's called what is it? What's the plan? Good Nights. Good Nights is the name of their plan. I've looked at every single power provider and I ran the numbers for everything. I've got a really detailed in-depth spreadsheet to compare every power provider when I first looked at all these options, and they by far were the best option. I've also created a blog article. So if you want to see this article, and it's so there's quite a few articles. But this one's pinned. It's called Building New. Use this hack for free hot water for life. You can find this article just on web3gym.com. And it'll be one of the top pinned articles. And if you want to reach out, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm at a lot of these sustainable construction series events. And yeah, feel free to reach out. I love automation. I love hacking systems. So yeah, that's us. I hope to see you at one of the next sustainable construction series, and I bid you a good day. Thank you.